We're Iceberging again. Years ago I made an iceberg for only The Last Airbender, but now that I've covered Korra as well, I'm doing it again. So this video will basically be a redux of that previous video, as well as adding a load of entries about The Legend of Korra too. Some of these I think are reasonable, some of these I think are nonsense. I'll let you know what I think about each one usually. I think we all know how the iceberg format works at this point, and if you don't, I'm sure you'll catch on quickly. I commissioned some brave and knowledgeable creators on the subject to make the original version of this iceberg, and I hit them up again to add the Korra parts to it as well. I think it turned out very good. Some of my own thoughts from my videos have found their way in here, so I hope you don't mind. I like the icebergs to talk about weird theories and observations, as well as a little trivia, so that's the style we're doing. I know this video is shorter than my last iceberg, but there probably are about twice as many topics to cover. I know the iceberg format usually calls for the video to be as long as possible, but I'm here to make quality, entertaining videos, not necessarily long ones if the script doesn't call for it. So it's shorter in time than most icebergs, and even my iceberg that I made years ago, but probably not shorter in topics covered. We like to keep it moving around here. Okay, let's start. Tier 1, no water at all. A lot of light. Zutara, pretty basic one. People online like to think Katara and Zuko should have ended up together, despite only really being on speaking terms for like the back 5 episodes of the show. Other than that, they range from bitter enemies to having a brief, confused understanding, to distant, but even more bitter enemies, to one-sided bitter enemies. Not a ton of space for any romancing there, if you ask me. Scheduling issues. The Legend of Korra has famously always had issues with its longer-form storytelling due to Nickelodeon only ordering so many episodes at a time. They ordered the first season, and by the way I understand it, ordered the second season close to when the first started airing, meaning that the first season was already totally completed. They pulled the same shit at the end of season 2, but instead ordered both seasons 3 and 4 at the same time. Many people blamed this for the struggles that Korra had with its story. Jet is alive. We didn't see Jet die on screen. We saw it be very heavily implied that rock turned his internal organs into alphabet soup, the only letters being present being D, E, A, and then even more D's. But we do never actually see him die. His absence from the Freedom Fighters in the canon comics after the show do not help this theory, but who knows, maybe he retired and started a zipline place or something. Remembrance's money problems, much in line with the scheduling troubles entry, the often hated, more often just straight up forgotten episode Remembrances, where it's basically just a recap episode, only exists because the team ran out of funding from Nickelodeon to actually make all the episodes of the show. So it was either let a bunch of the show's team go early to stay on budget, or do this kind of lame recap in the middle of the season. I'd wager it was the right choice. There's also a rumor that Remembrances took the place of a Kuvira backstory episode, and that's why her whole thing is so rushed at the end, but I don't know if that's ever been hard confirmed anywhere. Azula Ding. The Azula Ding is Azula's calling card. It is the classic tone that follows Azula around and often highlights her doing some Azula shit. Or acting like Azula. Could go unnoticed for the uninitiated. Varrick designed the giant mech, sort of an obvious one, with how the Legend of Korra pushed the idea that Varrick is a super genius in the later seasons. It stands to make sense that he designed not only the super laser, but also the building-sized robot it was stapled to. Varrick acts as if he has a change of heart halfway through this season and doesn't know about the robot, but he's also a scumfuck bastard liar, so hard to make a call. This IP also has, of course, the Mechanist, which made a super weapon for the bad guys and just didn't tell the good guys about it, so there may be a running theme here. I guess that should also be part of this iceberg. The Mechanist in Airbender designed the drill from The Drill, and he just didn't tell anyone, like a complete dick. Tier 2, water. Aang's parents. So true, Iceberg, it does stand to reason that yes, Aang would have parents. Perhaps one of more of which are pictured here, in shadow. But due to his culture not placing any importance on parentage, they aren't very important. Somewhere out there, back then at least, Aang certainly did have parents though. Bolin can lava bend due to his heritage. The idea is that lava benders are people that have both earthbending and firebending genetic backgrounds. You see, because they make the rocks hot, like fire. Well, either that or they're the Avatar, which just makes sense on its own. Anyway, Bolin is one example that we know that line of thinking is correct for, but the only other one we have to go off is Ghazan, and we unfortunately do not know his parentage. It's possible, and I honestly think it wouldn't be that whack of a development in the magic system either, but no way to know. Boomy seismic sense. In Ashan Sosa's Comet Part 2, during the Boomy flashback, we see Boomy very precisely attack multiple Fire Nation soldiers without having to see them. With him being an earthbender, does this imply seismic sense, or does it just make for a cool shot? Well, it's Boomy, and we know he is pretty good, so you be the judge. Aang is Amon. Aang is Amon is an early crack theory that was on the internet when Korra was first airing, shortly after learning that Amon could remove bending. Now, obviously, because Korra is alive, that means Aang would not be alive, but hey, who knew what world-bending, rule-breaking shit Korra was gonna pull when it was airing? No one knew at the time. Oh, also there was this fake screen cap going around that some people thought was real. Airbender Season 4. You sometimes hear that they always plan plan to make Airbender 4 seasons, and that is, from everything I've heard from the creators, all the background stuff I've watched, just not the case. It was always a 3-season structure from the very beginning, and they executed it very well. I might get it if people meant that they were planning to make the entire taking down Ozai plot 4 seasons long, but no, when people say this, they mean there was going to be another season after defeating Ozai. And it's like, guys, that was the climax, that was it, tied up nearly everything. Any finding Zuko's mom stuff after that would have been such a valley to the stakes and narrative, it would have been laughable. I think Aaron Ehasz, the head writer of the show, has come out and said that he had ideas for a 4th season, but to my knowledge, there was never any plan to execute them. The new cycle. Korra, after getting Rava ripped out of her and having Rava get flogged to death, somehow respawn Rava due to God Jinora showing up. So now Korra seems to be the start of a brand new Avatar cycle, leaving that old useless one in the dust. Sokka White Lotus Initiate. Sokka received a White Lotus tile from Pian Dao after training with him. Now this could be just a little Easter egg for the audience or a cool gesture from master to student, but some fans think that this could be some sort of invitation into the order, and I suppose it could be. We know there is an initiation process from this line.
You must forgive my nephew. He is not an initiate and has little appreciation for the cryptic arts.
And who knows, this could be the start of it. Lightning versus electricity. In Korra, bending has advanced greatly. One of these ways is that lightning generation's power has seemingly been able to be dialed down, so its results aren't so explosive. It can be controlled with seemingly little to no danger, and be used in a sustained way. That is why I theorize that the lightning generation of the old days and the electricity bending of Korra's age are two similar but very distinct skills, and they're not the same thing. Combustion Man's metal limbs. If you commit a little brain power to it, you can easily imagine just why Combustion Man has a metal arm and a metal leg. It'd probably be a pretty tricky power to get used to using. I can imagine myself getting it horribly wrong at least once. Would hope not for twice, but it's understandable. The new Airbenders got their powers. This entry is hard to parse just by reading it. The new Airbenders did indeed get their powers. Why? I do not know. The show doesn't really go into it. Boomy gets them, and he had an Airbender parent, but the rest of these schmucks? Your guess is as good as mine. Ty Lee is an Airbender. Ty Lee being an Airbender descendant is a classic. The idea is that Ty Lee is very acrobatic, has brown hair like Aang, which is quite rare in the Fire Nation, and also has gray eyes, much like Aang. She also has a very carefree and sweet demeanor, if you want to count that, but I don't know if that shit's genetic. The only real hiccup in this idea is that it would imply an Airbender 100 years ago had relations with a Firebender, which isn't impossible, but probably unlikely due to the whole all Airbenders must die thing. She could have airbending ties that go back further than that, I guess, but you would think that those Airbender traits would get drowned out by all the Fire Nation ones after several generations, but it's all just baseless speculation. She kind of looks and acts like an Airbender, so people think it could be. The Avatar State retcon. I know, red alert, everyone hates the word retcon, but Korra did change how the power of the Avatar State works. Roku in Airbender describes it as all the past lives channeling their energy through the current living Avatar, and that's what the glow is, and why they grow in power so immensely. This is clearly no longer the case in Korra, as she still gets a power boost after both her and Rava are both permanently severed from the past lives, meaning that it's simply the connection to Rava, and the Rava glow in the eyes that grants the boost in ability. Aang is not a murderer. Aang is not a murderer is straight up fiction. We know this. These guys are done. They didn't get up to the surface. I don't think these guys had parachutes yet. These guys just marched all the way up this mountain, and now, oh, come on. And then the infamous hateful bug bird that I will grant was not cut in twain, but was indeed injured badly and then left in the desert to suffer, at the very least. Aang, I know you've got this whole soft boy aesthetic you're going for, but man, you're bloodthirsty. Korra is related to Sokka and Katara. I think this one is just a misunderstanding that some people have, since Hakoda, Sokka and Katara's dad, was chief of the Southern Tribe, and Tonraq, Korra's dad, was also chief of the Southern Tribe. So some people think they're somehow related. This is not the case for a couple reasons. One is that the canon comics imply that chiefs are chosen rather than a passing down by blood, and two is that Tonraq is actually from the north and only later in life moved to the south and became chief. If the thing about chiefs being chosen wasn't true though, Korra could have been related to Yue somehow, but I don't think that's the case either. Puan Tin is an Avatar sympathizer. Puan Tin, aka the guy who wrote The Boy in the Iceberg, the play the gang goes and watches in the Ember Island Players, seems to have a soft spot for the Avatar and his friends. They are of course the stars and protagonists of his play. But when I think about it more, though he does display their triumphs, he also portrays them as a bunch of buffoons and rubes and morons. And then they fucking die at the end. I don't think I believe this one anymore. Wan and Aang's lion turtle friend. The lion turtle that first grants Wan his fire bending and the lion turtle that teaches Aang about energy bending are the same lion turtle. You can tell because during Wan's journey, you can see all of the lion turtles have different markings and eye colors. The lion turtle Aang meets has the same features of the one Wan lived on the back of. Tier 3, more water. A thought I had based on nearly no evidence, it just seems that the best airbender of each time tends to wear a very similar necklace. Yang Chen wore it, Aang calls Gyatso the greatest airbender of his time, and he wore it, and after the war is over, Aang wears a very similar one as well, and Aang, by default, is the greatest airbender alive. Tenzin doesn't wear one at any point though, not even on formal occasions, so maybe a bit of a hole in the theory there, maybe he's just too humble. Amon is alive. Amon being alive is certainly not impossible. We see characters tank similar explosions in this series with only very little shielding. It would have caught him off guard for sure, but him surviving isn't out of the question, and being in the middle of the sea when it happens, as long as he can still bend, wouldn't be an issue either. I guess this also means Tarlok could be alive, but who the hell cares? That's not even to mention that Korra doesn't even know that Amon is dead for sure in the show anyway. From her perspective, that dude just got away. She should probably assume he's still alive anyway. Waterbenders can boil water. People think that since waterbenders can freeze water, and because some earthbenders can create lava, waterbenders should be able to boil water. It being a kid's IP though, it's kind of hard to use that power, just like lava or knives, so I see why they didn't do that. People point to moments like these to say, look, they're creating steam, but I'm not sure if those people have ever heard of mist or fog before, because I'd be much quicker to call these moments just that, rather than an ability like boiling water to make steam that we never see outside of it. Sokka is the father. A bunch of people think Sokka is the father of Su Yin, because she looks sort of like him, maybe? A little bit? Maybe? Could be. Toph did seem to have a low-key crush on Sokka, and there have been even more hints to that in the comics, so you never know, I suppose. Hunting the Water Tribe Avatar. The Fire Nation's raids on the Southern Water Tribe centered on capturing waterbenders. This could be due to the fact that the Air Nomad Avatar never made themselves known during the war, and could have just been killed in the chaos of it all, so the Fire Nation could have just assumed they could find and capture the new Water Tribe Avatar using these raids. Unalaq's new Avatar cycle. Unalaq becoming a new sort of Avatar seemingly should have begun a new Avatar cycle. A dark Avatar cycle. Korra does seemingly purify/obliterate Kaiju Unalaq in their fight though, so would that count as dying in the Avatar state? Did the cycle end before it could even begin? Will it start anyway when Vatu eventually erupts from a future Avatar? Does the lore that the opposite primordial spirit comes from within the other, and now both of them being tied to humanity, imply that the next dark Avatar will be the son or the daughter of a future Avatar? Inquiring minds want to know. Master Yu and Shinfu dead. Yeah, Toph just left these two bozos out in the woods in this metal box. They're on a road at least, but who knows if anyone came along and then had the means or the want to get them out. Earth is not the third planet. During harmonic convergence, we clearly see the third planet from this solar system's sun has a ring around it. The Earth in this universe does not have a ring around it, which means that one of these other planets is Earth. I don't know which one. Gyatso vacuum attack. People have been mad about this on the other iceberg for years now. Would it be totally out of the question for me to just put the Overanalyzing Korra clip in here to get my take? I think not, so I'll do it. Somehow, I don't know when or why it happened, the fandom decided that Zahir doing this to the Earth Queen was somehow creating a vacuum. And that, of course, is applied to the other pretty out of nowhere theory that Gyatso did a similar thing on a larger scale in his final stand against a bunch of firebenders. And while I discuss why I think the theory makes even less sense in that scenario in my iceberg video I did a while ago, I still don't think that this is a vacuum either. I don't think that there's anything across either show shows us that what airbenders do, which is just blow gusts of wind around, has any level of precision close enough to making a vacuum. So let's look at what the show actually shows us. Zahir takes the breath out of the Earth Queen's lungs and surrounds her head with it. And I think that's all you really need to look at. It's pretty clear what the attack is actually doing. He takes the deoxygenated air out of her lungs and makes that her only air supply, forcing her to breathe it over and over. Her body uses up more of the oxygen with every gasping breath, and eventually she asphyxiates. He chokes her out basically, but that doesn't mean what the Earth Queen is experiencing is a vacuum. Like, I don't think so, at least, if we're defining it properly. That seems like an enormous leap to take, that Zahir is such a crazy airbender that he can remove all oxygen from an area when, like I said, it's mostly just kicking wind around. Even still, the ball head thing isn't far from the reality that people think of. It's clear that he's somehow preventing more oxygen from getting in, which still seems pretty fucked and almost illogical to me, since at the end of the day, all he's doing is spinning a ball of air, so I get the confusion. And even then, the moment is thrown into question even more when it's ended so, artistically? Zahir removing the bubble and taking the Earth Queen's breath away is supposed to be representative of her death. It's her life leaving, I get it. But she's still, like, struggling and straining as it happens, so just, like, start breathing again, right now, this nanosecond. It's a great big moment in the story, and for Zahir, and probably the clearest death we ever get to see on screen, but also it feels clunky upon overanalyzation. To me, it's pretty clear what happens here. Zahir chokes the Earth Queen out with her own deoxygenated breath. I don't know, the vacuum thing doesn't really stand up to a second thought to me. But I also get the thought because the scene is set up and proceeds so strangely. So Amon can permanently take your bending away, and though it's never explained directly how, despite him using a similar form to energy bending, it's widely accepted that it's just something he can do with blood bending. Amon's cronies are expert chi blockers, and it it would stand to reason that he would be skilled in the practice as well, as he's masquerading as a non-bender, but is still obviously very competent physically. Amon's ability to take bending away could just be a super version of chi blocking, enhanced and combined with his blood bending. Gyatso White Lotus, another with not much to go on with the White Lotus. For a split second in a flashback, we see that Gyatso played Pai Sho using the White Lotus tile, a tile that Iroh says is oft unused, but is integral to the members of the White Lotus. This could mean that Gyatso was part of the order. Or maybe he was just trying to style an Aang with some whack-ass strategy. Korra is the most spiritually attuned avatar of all time. You wouldn't think this right off the bat. Korra doesn't really care about all the spirit junk at the start, but by the end, Korra's seeing shit through the spirit minds like it's no problem. And then she gets spirit answers just by touching the floor of a train station. Aang could never. Sokka laid pipe. In the Southern Raiders, it's heavily implied that Sokka and Suki have some alone time. The morning after, Sokka is fiddling with a flower necklace, which is known as a lei in Hawaiian culture. This is to show that he got laid. Get it? Tenzin non-bender romance because eugenics. This is kind of a messed up one. So we know that Tenzin had a relationship with Lin, right? But then Pema came along and basically stole Tenzin out from under her. And that's as much of the story as we really get. But we know Tenzin and how much he identifies with his responsibility and his role in the world and in his culture as an airbender. It would make sense that he would realize at some point, especially coming from a mixed bending family, that a family with Pema would more likely result in a family of more airbenders or non-benders rather than a family with Lin, where the results could be airbender, non-bender, or earthbender. It's very possible Tenzin just played the odds for the sake of his culture. Yue sent the meteor. Yue did not send the meteor for Space Sword. I won't have it. If Yue's moon powers involve the ability to hurl meteors and then know her ex-boyfriend would have a swordmaster training arc and also would have the presence of mind to use that meteor as ore for a sword she for some reason knew he was gonna make, then fuck me, I guess she sent it. General Iroh is the greatest firebender to ever live. I mean, think about it. He's the only firebender we've ever seen use sustained firebending flight without Sozin's comment. Or the Avatar state, I guess. That's a feat right up there with Zhong's firewall. That's a rocket jump. Be reasonable. There's nothing sustained about this. This dude, though, look at him. When he fucking takes off like this, holy. Sozin used dragons. The only way to get up to an air temple is on the back of a flying bison, and I doubt the Fire Nation has any of those. Shut up, Bang. What about the dragons? You say it yourself. There were loads of them. The Fire Nation was lousy with dragons when you were a kid, and firebending flight doesn't seem to be an option to the layman Fire Nation soldiers at the end of wartime, so I doubt they flew up there back then. It just had to be dragons, man. The world is unbalanced because of one ceiling Vatu. Well, if you think about it, with all this yin-yang imagery the show wants us to catch on to, you would think that if you seal yang away, the world would be out of balance, certainly not in balance, right? I don't know just how messed up the world was during or before Wan's time. It didn't seem so bad, but I guess it meant Rava and Vatu had to just wrestle in perpetuity for all time. Maybe that was the sum total of all the big-time conflict, though. I think what this entry is trying to say is that the world can't be balanced because one of the great spirits isn't acting. But the show only ever uses the iconography of these mindsets and doesn't actually try to apply any of this spiritual thinking or ideas, so I don't know. Momo is Gyatso. The original plan was actually for Momo to be a reincarnation of Monk Gyatso, according to the creators. Momo takes a liking to Aang right away, and for some reason leads him directly to Gyatso's corpse. There is a connection there for sure, but things get lost and left behind in the creation process, and I don't mind this topic not being explored. Tier 4, water but less light. Ko in the physical world. The question arises, how did Ko get all of those human faces? Does he jump humans that somehow end up in the spirit world, or meditate there? How often does that happen? I can't imagine it's a lot. What seems more likely, to me at least, is that he goes all horror movie on the physical world once in a while as a little treat for himself. Sokka's death. Sokka's death is still a mystery to us. We're not sure how it happened. We know he survived his encounter with Yakone in Republic City, because we later hear that he helped stop Zahir and company from kidnapping Korra. With that being the last thing we hear of Sokka's story, some people have concluded that Sokka dies in that conflict. I don't think there's any real reason to believe that, personally, but I understand the idea of wanting to know how a fan-favorite character may have been horribly murdered/exploded. Hama got Kaya killed. So Hama was the very last of the Southern Waterbenders to be captured by the Fire Nation. She would have also instantly become famous after breaking out of prison with bloodbending. Thus, the stigma of, holy shit, there was a crazy woman waterbender who could literally bend you was born. This stigma could have followed the Southern Raiders all the way to the South Pole, where they were looking for the one last waterbender. Not wanting a repeat situation of crazy scary waterbender escaping, this raid for the first time was not taking prisoners, and instead killed Kaya rather than taking her to prison. Kinda messed up Katara was all buddy-buddy with her, huh? Superpowered bending genetics. Now, bending and genetics do seem to be linked heavily, but it's obviously not as simple as my parents were benders, so I will be a bender. Boomy, for example, had two bending parents and wasn't a bender. Well, he wasn't born a bender. Katara, on the other side of the coin, had two non-bending parents and turned out to be a bender. So at the end of the day, it all just might be a weighted crapshoot. But what we do learn from the Yakone family is that insane, unique bending can be passed down from parent to child, as both his sons were daylight bloodbenders, which means that not just bending, but bending power and skill can be passed down. Earth bloodbending. I'm still mad about this. I'm calling all you people out again. Not only is the iron in our blood so minuscule compared to how much bendable liquid there would be, you guys are still only thinking about that dumb moment from that X-Men movie. Korra blows up the world. Okay, so like with the new series taking place in what has been described as a post-cataclysm and the world being shattered into not the four nations, many people have concluded that Korra is directly to blame. I'm certain that some bad shit will have gone down, no doubt, and maybe Korra fails on some level, but I'm sure she's not like the direct reason, right? They wouldn't do that, right? Actor Toph. Actor Toph, of course, refers to the actor in the Ember Island Players that depicts her. This entry probably refers to the idea that people think she's depicted this way because the Fire Nation troops she massacres on the regular describe her as a massive, tough earthbender because they're embarrassed to be beaten by a little girl. It's either that or because Actor Toph is much closer to the original concept for Toph, who's just this big earthbender dude. Korra jump. This one's a sensitive topic, so I'll cover it quickly. Some people think that this scene at the end of season 1 is implying that Korra wants to throw herself from this cliff. I don't think the show feels like it's leading there at all, though there are some visual symbolisms that could lead you to conclude that. I just don't think you're supposed to take that from the scene at all, though. Earth Navy. The Earth Navy is mentioned a single time in Airbender, and Zuko implies the existence of Earth Kingdom ships early on, but we never ever even a single time see an Earth Navy ship. Not once. We see some Dai Li boats on Lake Laogai, but that's it. Pretty crazy we never see any boats from one of the main nations in the 100-Year War, especially considering how much of Book 1 takes place on the water. Azula Fire Healer. Could this random old lady fire sage on the random island Korra washes up on be Azula? Why would it be Azula, you ask? Well, obviously because of her hair. No one changes hairstyles in this universe into old age, so it checks out. Waterbenders can redirect lightning. This seems to just be a misunderstanding because Iroh thought of the technique of redirecting lightning from observing the waterbenders. It's still a firebending technique, he just applies the thinking of another bending style. It's not like waterbenders can do it. Suki died young. The only time we ever see Suki in The Legend of Korra is in this painting of the gang in the opening minute of the show. Otherwise, she goes totally unseen and unmentioned. I suppose this could mean she died young, but she also wasn't that important of a member of Team Avatar, you know what I mean? Maybe she just went unmentioned because there was nothing notable about her after the series ended. Sozin killed his own dragon. We know that Sozin had a pet dragon. We also know that Sozin started the tradition of hunting dragons. 1 + 2 multiplied by we know he was a real dick equals Iroh Zahir debate. Iroh makes his home in the spirit world in Korra's time, right? And we know that Zahir very likely spends most of his time pre and post Korra season 3 in the spirit world as well. And we even know that Iroh knows about and spends some time in Zahir's favorite spot, Jai Bao's Grove, which would lead me to conclude that they have probably met, and I would like to think, debated philosophy. Yue would have been the next Avatar. Yue was born as if she were asleep, and according to my research, that is very not good. So the theory is that Yue was planned to be the next Avatar in the cycle somehow, if Aang had not been frozen and lived out his life normally. So Yue was born without the Avatar spirit that I suppose would have been crucial to her, and that would be why the Moon Spirit's spirit energy was able to grant her life, because she needed some of that good spirit shit to get her going. Now, I actually don't mind this theory. I think it's alright. Past Avatars bending in the real world. So at the end of Korra season 1, Aang shows up like seemingly in the flesh and energy bends Korra's bending back, which is pretty crazy that that just happens and it's never mentioned again. The closest other example would be when Kyoshi shows up and entered in a cyclone, and I guess that would be considered the same thing, but she was also clearly possessing the current physical avatar. The Korra one is the one that really stands out. If the avatars can just appear seemingly in the flesh and use bending, something that is tied to one's physical body, why don't they just show up all the time? Kyoshi showed up just because people are chatting shit about her. It clearly doesn't have to be like a big moment or a low point or something. Tier 5, much more water, much less light. The Mechanist met Zuko. Okay, so this one's a little hard to follow, so stick with me, right? We know that the Mechanist and his group of refugees took up residence in the Northern Air Temple years before the gang shows up and Aang gets all pissed off. We also know that Zuko's game plan when first given the mission to find the Avatar was to search the 4 air temples first, which means it's very likely that Zuko got to the Northern Air Temple and found the Mechanist there. It could even be the reason why the Fire Nation knows the Mechanist is up there and why the Mechanist ends up making weapons for them when you think about it. Avatar spirit split from dying Aang. So Aang died, like for real, he was donezo, in the Avatar state and everything, but then Katara brings him back. Now the thought is that somewhere in that whole messed up process, some Rava or Avatar power did actually find a way to reincarnate, beginning a second Avatar line. This may even explain why Korra's Avatar state seems to be so much weaker than Aang's, because she has literally less Rava. Though Aang's was still completely insane during the comet, and that was after his first death, so maybe it doesn't check out at all. Ko killed the Blue Spirit. Ko has a face that looks vaguely like Zuko's Blue Spirit mask, which would mean the Blue Spirit was based on an actual spirit, a spirit that doesn't have a face anymore. Damn, unlucky. Just what was evil Korra anyway? That's a great question, Iceberg. I think it's rather obvious that evil Korra is a visual manifestation of Korra's trauma in her head and feelings of weakness, no question there. But also the spirit that was moonlighting as a dog also definitely for real saw evil Korra, like confirmed. So that also means it was at least actually spiritually, physically present in some way. I don't know, we never see it again after Korra confronts Zahir later in that season, and then it just goes unmentioned, even though there seem to be hints that there was more to it. Oma made Wulong Forest. Oma, I will remind you, is the woman from the Cave of Two Lovers legend. In that legend, we see her raise giant earth pillars, a lot like the ones we see Aang and Ozai fight at, which is named Wulong Forest. Though the thought is cool, Omashu and Wulong Forest are actually pretty far apart from each other on the map, so it seems unlikely. Aang was able to resist Yakone because he learned bloodbending in a past life. When Aang is chasing down Yakone, Yakone turns around eventually and starts bloodbending him. Aang is able to break free from his grip from entering the Avatar state. While I think it's possible that a past Avatar may have learned bloodbending, I don't think that's why Aang could break free. Katara explains that since she is a more Sai, powerful waterbender than Hama, she is able to ignore her bloodbending grip, and the same holds true for Amon being able to walk through Tarlok's bloodbending. From how Katara words it, you simply have to be a stronger waterbender, and it seemed that Aang, without the Avatar state, was weaker in that respect than Yakone. But once he activated the Avatar state, Aang becomes like the best at everything by 10 miles, so thus he could break the grip. Zuko hair theory. The crux of this one is that Zuko's hair represents his growth over the series. He starts with his banishment haircut, and as seasons 2 and 3 play out, he grows as a character along with his hair. Now the more interesting part is that in Zuko's childhood, he always had one strand of hair not tied back. He just barely didn't fit in with the perfect hair we see Azula and Ozai wear, and even when he returns back home, he still has these little tufts of hair that aren't properly tied up. This is meant to symbolize that he still doesn't fit in. It's a fine little theory, I don't mind it. I think it'd be a lot better if during Zuko's coronation his hair was perfectly tied back to symbolize the fact that he's found his way and is doing what he needs to do now. Jinora is some sort of spirit god. Yeah, I mean, I guess so, right? How else do you decipher what the hell happened at the end of book 2? Original bathing suits. Okay, the story for this one's a little weird. The myth, I'll call it for this one, is that the original swimsuits for the beach episode of Airbender were much more revealing. The reasoning was that the creators thought that no matter what, Nickelodeon would never accept a first draft on bathing suits and tell them to go back and redesign them. So what the team did was make the first draft totally out of the question so they could draw up bathing suits teenagers might actually wear for the second draft and then come back to Nickelodeon with those designs and have a much better chance of having them get greenlit since they were toned down from the first ones. I heard this somewhere once, but I have no idea if it's true or not. It's funny if it is true. Kai is an audience insert. Kai sort of comes along out of nowhere, steals all the spotlight from all the other airbenders, and is this cool, sarcastic ne'er-do-well that don't give a damn about nothing. Now, I know Korra is aimed at a slightly older audience, but it still surely hit that male of about that age demographic as well. And before Kai, there was no audience surrogate for that age group. And Korra Season 3 definitely tried to emulate Airbender more than any of the other seasons. I think Kai was a plant. The Church of Wan Shi Tong. Wan Shi Tong has a giant spirit library, and it takes thumbs to build a giant spirit library, I figure. And owls don't have thumbs, and foxes don't have thumbs. So I theorize at some point Wan Shi Tong was actively worshipped as a knowledge god by a sect of humans. A sect of humans I would gladly join. All glory to the owl god. Zahir was an air acolyte and likely met Aang. This one seems pretty reasonable. With Zahir obviously having a great interest in airbending history and culture, I would be surprised if he wasn't an air acolyte, or at least wanted to be one at some point, and with his ambition, that would probably lead him to having met Aang at some point. Whoever's headcanon this is, I say good job. Tier 6, Abyssal Nightmare Realm. Toph can see. There are a few instances of weirdness with Toph's vision. For example, why is Toph of all people worried about Aang's tattoos? She can't tell what Katara looks like.
I'd return the compliment, but I have no idea what you look like.
But she knows Aang has tattoos. Weird, right? Also, she seems to know that all of the White Lotus people are a bunch of old dudes without anyone telling her, unless she can tell by their breathing or heartbeat or something, which isn't the craziest thing I've ever heard, actually. Toph can see the entire universe. When Korra meets Toph in the swamp, Toph explains that through the vines she can see everything that's happening all around the world. Now, the interpretation I always read from that is that since the Banyan Grove tree's roots run so wide and so deep, she could use her seismic sense that would certainly have gotten even better with age to see her family and friends. Now, the other reading of it is that the swamp is a spiritual place, and Toph could have reached some sort of spiritual enlightenment there, which allowed her to tap into the vines much like the Avatar can, just on a far grander scale. I think either reading is valid enough, but I also think it's just a pretty silly thing to write in. Katara saw Kaya dead. The way the Katara flashback is shot in the Southern Raiders, Katara runs out to get her dad to help because Yanra is already in their house, and then when they get back, Kaya has already been killed. But the show shows us Hakoda and Katara just bust in through the door, meaning that Katara could have very well saw her mother's charred and smoking corpse. Anyone could be anyone. Why is no one talking about this? The Legend of Korra introduced a medical surgical procedure that can literally make someone look completely different, like a brand new person, no noticeable scarring, and you just look like a completely novel human being. Are you crazy? Anyone could be anyone. How do we know that Mako is still Mako? What if Two-Toed Ping killed him and then body snatched his face and is now just living his life? They both clearly have a thing for red scarves. No shit, you should be worried about Amon being alive. Not only did you not confirm him actually being gone, he could be literally anyone. Jinora deserved her tattoos. Yeah, fucking right. I dare you. I double dog dare you. Name 2 things that Jinora did specifically to do with airbending that would lead you to believe she deserves her tattoos. Yeah, you got the one thing. Name a second one. Cabbage Man. I don't know what this one is. It's right at the bottom of the iceberg, so it must be pretty obscure. Huh. Hey, Alex Bale, you know what this means?
Nope, never heard of him.
I know, right? Weird. Patreon shoutouts. If you want to see a brand new video from me ahead of the YouTube release, you can support me on Patreon for just a few bucks. Link, as always, is in the description below the video. Biggest shoutouts of all go to my top patrons. Blanco, who has a one-time emergency flare they can fire out of their mouth. Kevin Bartlin, who made friends with the people running the simulation, so now they have admin access to reality. Potato Scream, who was blessed with 64 extra years of life from a floating orb that asked them if they wanted the extra life or double it and give it to the next vertebrate. Saint Expedite, who has already donated one of each organ and is still a registered organ donor. I don't know how. Sam Udatong, who survived a totally unjust hanging by simply flexing their neck muscles and causing the noose to explode. The former meaning of life, who has a bioluminescent intimidation display when they feel threatened. The 1 AM party, who survived a blizzard by casting a blizzard of their own in the opposite direction. And Whitrow, who won the world record for lowest altitude parachute opening and saved a cat from a tree on the way down. And my other fuck you money patrons, a flock of plain cakes, A2AX Phoenix, Anthony Collins, Insomnite, Midnight Balsam, Slokey, Tater of Tots, That One Turian, and Trendkill. And my god overanalyzers, 2 Boots Are Beat, Aang, Andrew Watford, On0 Weeze, Blade Dancer, Buniverse, Carlo Ren, Cosmic Newbie, Danny Stevens, Dr. Xerox, Dominic Saint, Emma Not Emma, Aaron Grace, Fire Lizard 44, Jackson, Jeremy Rubenstein, John Warhammer, Justin Scott, Mac, Matthew Lang, Michael Fallon, Mitchell Gobrecht, Nick, Nicholas Abbott, Peter Bandera, Peter Bayron, Philip Jindra, Pogger White, Rocket Mist, Ryan Maxwell, Scoobert, Shane Antonacci, Silktoe, Science Person, Smarty Marty, Princess Useless Backwards, Super Snipper, That Blind Ginger, Totoro Bobro's Musical Emporium, and some sort of bear face. I don't know. Next up, oh, what a night.